Hey Booktube, it's Samantha, and I know you're probably wondering, where is that TBR that you said you're going to be posting? It's still in the editing process. I did film it. It's just a little overwhelming to edit it all together, so it's still in the works. And I need to post it because for Monsterathon, you have to post your TBR to get points, so I'll post it eventually. But in the meantime, I just hauled a lot of books and I wanted to talk about them because I'm very excited about them. I don't buy books very often, and I had some birthday money left over from June. So I decided, you know what? I had a good week. I'm gonna reward myself by buying some books. So that's what I did. That's what we're here for. But before we get into the books that I bought, I want to talk very briefly about some books that I got in a subscription box. Now, I normally don't do subscription boxes. Like I said, I don't normally buy books just in general, so the idea of doing a subscription box has always been a little in for me because I want to make sure the books that I'm getting are ones that I really want. But I was really intrigued by Nightworm's subscription box, and I ended up getting September's. I'm also getting October's, which I'm really excited about. That hasn't come in yet, obviously, because it's still September, but I did get 3 books and wanted to talk about them first. So if for some reason you're not wanting to know what those books are, I'll leave a timestamp here that you can skip to, but I'm pretty sure there's a whole bunch of unboxing Nightworms videos out there, but I'm just gonna briefly talk about the ones that I have. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Shadow Vista by Charles Coila and Mark Streisand. This is actually the first Nightworms published book. So that was, I know, really exciting. And I really loved how thin it was. I have actually already read this, and I will talk about it in my wrap up for the month, but this is about a security team, and they are watching over this basically abandoned neighborhood complex that was being built. And it turns out that there is a killer that is using it as their own personal graveyard. The security team happens to have a run-in with the killer. I don't believe you can find this anywhere else except with the subscription box. I'll have to double check that. If you can find it, I'll leave it down below on how you can get this book. The next book is also another book that I've already read. I was really excited about getting these books, and that is America's First Female Serial Killer by Mary Kay McBriar. This is a nonfiction book about America's first serial killer, female serial killer. I am not a nonfiction person whatsoever. And a big reason is because it seems like the nonfiction books that I have picked up in the past are so focused on dates and factual information and just putting them together in a timeline, which, I mean, as it should be, but for me, it's always hard because it's not really told as a story, and it doesn't really seem like there's a plot because it's someone's life. So I've always really struggled with nonfiction. The only other nonfiction that I had read and enjoyed was Devil in the White City. I really enjoyed that one because there was somewhat of a mystery plot to it, of trying to figure out how H.H. Holmes was going to be caught and how he did things. Like, it was written in a really story-like way, and this one hit the nail on the dot. There is a little note from the author, which I highly recommend that you read, because she talks about how she put this book together and talking about her perspective about writing about Jane Toppin, or her birth name is Honora Kelly. I found that to be very eye-opening. Also, if you're looking for a POC author, this one will fit the bill. And then the third book that was in the subscription box that I have not read yet, but I am very excited about reading, is Standalone by Paul Michael Anderson. From what I understand, this is about a bunch of different movie monsters or serial killers, such as like Michael Myers, Jacob Voorhees kind of thing, from what I understand. And they are being hunted down, so they're trying to figure out how to survive. So it's kind of the reverse effect of a typical slasher film, which I thought was a really cool premise. So I am really excited about getting to this book. I just haven't yet. Okay, so now are the books that I've actually bought. There's probably more than what I would like to admit to, but that's just where we are. So the first book of one of them that I bought, and this shouldn't be a surprise once I show it, and that is Abbots and Skate by James S.A. Corey. This is book 3 of the Expanse series. If you've been paying attention to my wrap-ups and whatnot, I have been slowly working my way through this series and have absolutely loved book 1 and book 2, and it was time to buy book 3. The first book, Leviathan Wakes, is the whole series in itself is like a space opera, and we are following 2 individuals in the first book. It's basically trying to survive this disease substance thing that is turning people into like walking zombies. Just the right amount of balance of action and character development. I always feel attached to the characters. In book 2, they had some of the same ones, but they also introduced new ones, which was a really good balance as well. The last sentence of book 2 was a mind blower, so I'm very excited about getting into this one. I know they're big, but they are so easy to read. I am definitely one of those people that gets a little nervous about science fiction and getting lost in all the technical mumbo jumbo, but this series does a really great job of presenting that information well, and it almost reads more like an action thriller book than it does sci-fi, but it definitely is sci-fi though. So it's a great series to introduce yourself into. So looking forward to reading that one. The next book I'm going to talk about is one that was talked about a lot on book 2, at least from what I saw some months back when it was first published, and just based on what I heard and what it sounded like the book was about, I just felt like this would actually be up my alley, and that is Wilder Girls by Rory Power. The cover is absolutely beautiful. From what I understand, there is this thing called the tox that is going around spreading and killing people. There is an all-girls school on this island. The only place that's safe is inside the school. So one of the girls goes missing, and our main character goes out to try and find that person that was missing. From what I kind of understood is that it's kind of horror, but more a weird, creepy atmosphere that's like Lord of the Flies but with girls. This might be a shocker, but I actually have never read Lord of the Flies. I was never required to read that book in school. I actually still haven't read it to this day. I've always planned on reading it eventually, but just haven't gotten there yet. I'm very curious about this book. I think it is something I'm actually going to enjoy, so I will hopefully jump into this soon. The next book that I'm going to talk about, I'm pretty sure is one that recently came out. I saw it being talked about on book Twitter. I was immediately gravitating toward it. I put it on my TBR, so when I saw it on the shelves, I knew I had to pick it up, and that is The Ghost Tree by Christina Henry. This is a book about a girl named Lauren who lives in this town called Smith's Hollow, and apparently there were 2 girls whose bodies were torn apart in the town, and The killer was never found. Her father's heart was torn out also and killed later on, but everyone just kind of moved on from it. Lauren eventually starts having dreams about those girls' bodies being dragged through the woods, and she kind of takes it upon herself to try and figure out how they died. It turns out that it might be a more sinister environment than what she thought it would be. It just sounds really, really cool. It sounds like it's really creepy. It actually is labeled horror on the back of the book, but I will say that I found this book at Barnes and Noble, but it was in the science fiction or fantasy section. They do have a horror section, which I absolutely love. I actually, I may or may not have went to 2 Barnes and Nobles yesterday looking at books, and actually that was a really good thing to do because they had different selections. But this book I found consistently was with the sci-fi fantasy genre rather than horror. So if you're looking for this book, you won't find it there. You'll find it somewhere else. But yeah, very excited to read this. It is a little bit bigger again, but I have a feeling I'm gonna blow through it really, really quick. This next book I have completely picked up on a whim. I didn't really know anything about it, but when I show you the cover, that's what drew me in, and that is Cursed by Thomas Wheeler. This cover is freaking awesome. It kind of has almost a D&D vibe to it because it is about this girl named Nimue who has had ties to darker magic, whether it's purposeful or not, I'm not sure, but the people in her druid village have always been nervous about being around her. Her village is entirely slaughtered by red paladins, and Mother's dying wish is to reunite this specific ancient sword with a sorcerer. She is kind of hell-bent on revenge for her mother, but also on fulfilling her mother's dying wish. And she's going out and about. And apparently this sword is meant to, that is supposed to determine the one true king. And the whole catchphrase on the inside of the cover is, "Whoever wields the sword of power shall be the one true king. But what if the sword was chosen a queen?" I just really like that premise. I like the different classes that are used in D&D. Honestly, I am all here for it. It may not necessarily be an extremely original plot line with the person who has been kind of an outcast and is set forth on this big epic adventure to return a sword and whatnot, and they might be the chosen one, but the fact that it's a female as the main character is just something I've always wanted in a book, and it's always a boy. It's always a boy, especially in the older books, the classic fantasy ones that, you know, they built the foundation of what we have for fantasy, but this is something I've always been wanting to read, so that's why I picked it up. This book actually is really heavy, and I'm not sure if it's just the cover. I think part of it is the paper that it's made out of, but if you didn't notice, there are also illustrations in the book. So I think they had to print it out on heavier paper in order for it to translate well. I did look at this. Apparently it's soon to be a Netflix original series, but it is a sticker. It is a sticker. So that's why I was like, okay, I'll go ahead and buy it. Because normally I do not like whenever it has that sticker that's printed into the cover. I do not like that whatsoever. Very excited about that one whenever I get to it. The next book I bought is actually one that I have heard from multiple people is really, really good. And it's also written by a POC author. So I really wanted to give it a try. After picking up this book that's so heavy and then picking up this one, it's so light, even though it's the same size. But I'm actually really excited about reading this one, and that is The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. I'm pretty sure this is a series. Yep, it's apparently part of the Burning series. This is book 1. We are following a main character named Tau, T-A-U. He lives in a world where 1 in 2,000 women can call down dragons to use, and 1 in 100 men can turn themselves into like they can transform into this big killing machine. And he just wants to live a peaceful, normal life. But there are people who come and kill his, they kill those that are closest to him. And so he kind of goes out on this plot for revenge to be the greatest swordsman ever, to avenge his loved ones, but also to kill those who had betrayed him. So I'm really curious about that, about who betrayed him. This just seems like a really interesting plot line. And then again, like I said, I've heard a lot of people say this is so good. So I really want to give it a try and see what I think of it. So this next one is something that I normally wouldn't pick up, but I heard about it on book Twitter again. There is just so much about it that I think I would really enjoy that I wanted to give it a try. And that is Haunted Nights, which is an anthology that is put together by Ellen Datlaw and Lisa Morton. Basically, it's a bunch of Halloween scary stories. I'm just really intrigued by that in and of itself, but then also the authors who have contributed stories to this. Shauna McGuire, who you all know I'm obsessed with. Garth Nix, which I also have a love of Garth Nix. He wrote the Sabriel Abortion series, which I really love. Stephen Graham Jones, who we'll actually see later today. Jonathan Mayberry, who is very big in the horror industry. And then there are some other ones that I'm not as familiar with, but those were the names that really stuck out to me that I know of and I know I like. I normally don't pick up anthologies. Normally I like to read one story all in one book, like these. I don't normally go for shorter stories, but when it comes to scary stuff or horror stories, I think they work best in those shorter punches, kind of like with Shadow Vista. They just seem to work well when someone isn't trying to drag it out. So I figured if I'm going to try an anthology, this is probably going to be the best type of anthology for me to pick up. So I'm really excited about getting to this. I think I'm going to try and work this into my October TBR just because it is Halloween-y. So this next book, I kind of picked it up on a whim. I really love the cover of it though. I really don't know too much about it, and that is The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd Jones. Again, I love this cover. I'm like obsessed with skulls. So I saw this and I just had to. The plot of it also sounds pretty interesting. We're following a girl named Rin. Her biggest concerns in life are her family and the graveyard. So her family is basically the grave diggers of the town. It's actually a really important job because the dead don't necessarily stay dead. It's rumored that it is because of a curse. She is working with a person named Ellis, who's kind of like a map maker. They go out to try and figure out how to break this curse. It sounds interesting. The reason why it's called Bone Houses is because when the dead come back to life, they're referred to as the Bone Houses. I don't necessarily know why bone houses. I don't know if they like form a house or if it's just the term they use. I'm not really sure, but I am willing to find out. Okay, this next book is one that I've heard a lot of good things about. It's actually been recommended to me a few times. I just picked it up because I felt like it would be a really good fit, and that is Violet by Scott Thomas. This book is about a woman whose name is Chris. When she was a little girl, her mother had died. Decades later, Chris's husband dies in a car accident. So to try and recover from the grief of losing her husband, Chris and her 8-year-old daughter go back to the house that her mother had died in to try and recover from that grief. But within the house that her mother died in, she meets a friend an old friend that may not be too much of a friend. It says an evil has grown. So very curious about it. It's definitely a different kind of plot that I'm used to. As you can see here, it looks like it's a ghost / imaginary friend turned evil kind of thing. I really do love ghost stories, so I'm curious about how this will work. My only thing, you see these? I'm not a big fan of reading books that have this. I love the look of it. The look is amazing, but when I'm reading them, I'm one of those people that I turn pages from the side, not from up top or the bottom. So I always end up turning like 3 or 4 pages at a time. But I will learn to get used to it because I do love the look of it, and I'm very excited to get into this. I've heard really good things about it. I've heard that it's something unlike other people have ever read before. So I'm very curious to see how I will enjoy this. And then the last book. I know. Another one that I've heard really, really good things from, especially all over book Twitter, is The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. Like I said, he was one of the people that wrote a story in this one. I don't know much about it. It says here that there are 4 American Indian men who are childhood friends. There was something that happened when they were kids that it says that it puts them in a desperate struggle for their lives. They are being tracked by an entity seeking retribution. So I'm guessing that they had done something when they were kids and now they're trying to fight for their lives against their culture and traditions that have caught up with them. So it just sounds really interesting. I have heard only good things about this book. I haven't heard a single negative thing. Again, another POC author. I've been eyeing this book for months. Little spoiler alert, this is actually one of the books that is on my TBR, but I was planning on going to the library to read it. So I'm just gonna read it this way. So very excited about that book, even though I don't know much about it. And that is what I bought. All those books. Look at that. That is a lot. That is a lot. I'm definitely not going to be able to buy books for a very long time now. This is way too many. If there are any of the books that I have bought that you think I should get to sooner rather than later, let me know down in the comments below. I will work on that September TBR. But until next time, see ya.